The airport terminal buzzed with chaos, but for Caleb, the world was silent, crushed under the weight of his mother's parting words. "You're too gay for this family." She'd left him there, suitcase at his feet, her taillights fading into the Chicago dusk. At 18, he was alone, abandoned in a sea of strangers, with nowhere to go and no one to call. Caleb's heart pounded as he sank onto a cold metal bench outside O'Hare International Airport. The November wind bit at his cheeks, but it was the sting of betrayal that cut deeper. His mother, Ellen, had always been strict, her love conditional, tied to her rigid expectations. But this was a severance he hadn't seen coming. He'd come out to her just a week ago, hoping for understanding, maybe even acceptance. Instead, she'd book him a one-way ticket from their small Illinois town to Chicago, claiming it was for a fresh start. The truth hit when she drove away without looking back. He clutched his worn backpack, the only thing tethering him to his old life. Inside were a few clothes, a dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby, and a photo of his dad, who died when Caleb was 10. His father had been his anchor, the one who taught him to dream big, to love fiercely. Now, with both parents gone, one to death, the other to prejudice, Caleb felt like a ship adrift. As he sat, a scruffy dog appeared, its fur matted and gray, eyes wide and searching. It wasn't a beautiful creature, not the kind you'd see in pet store ads, but there was something in its gaze, something human, almost. It sat a few feet away, watching Caleb with an intensity that felt like it understood his pain. "What do you want, Mutt?" Caleb muttered, his voice hoarse. The dog tilted its head, then trotted closer, nudging his hand with a wet nose. For the first time that day, Caleb's lips twitched into a faint smile. He didn't notice the man watching him from across the terminal entrance. Tall, with tousled brown hair and a leather jacket, the stranger leaned against a pillar, his eyes soft but curious. Caleb was too lost in his thoughts to see him, too focused on the dog, now curling up at his feet. The animal's warmth was a small comfort, a flicker of light in the dark. The dog stayed with him as night fell, the airport's neon glow casting long shadows. Caleb's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since morning, but he had no money, no plan. He considered sleeping on the bench, but the thought of security guards shooing him away made his chest tighten. The dog, as if sensing his unease, stood and tugged at his sleeve with its teeth, pulling him toward the parking lot. "Where are you taking me?" Caleb whispered, half expecting the dog to answer. It led him past rows of cars, through a chain-link fence, and into a quiet, wooded area just beyond the airport sprawl. The city's hum faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Caleb's pulse quickened. This was reckless, following a stray into the unknown, but something in the dog's steady gait told him to trust it. They stopped at a clearing where a small, abandoned shed stood, its door ajar. Inside, Caleb found a blanket, a half-eaten bag of chips, and a crumpled note. "If you're here, you're lost. But you're not alone." The handwriting was messy, almost childlike, but the words hit Caleb like a lifeline. He sank to the floor, the dog curling up beside him, and for the first time in hours, he let himself cry. The next morning, Caleb woke to the sound of footsteps. The dog growled softly, its ears perked. A figure stood in the doorway, the man from the terminal, his leather jacket now slung over one shoulder. "You okay?" the stranger asked, his voice gentle but firm. Caleb froze, his hand tightening on the dog's scruff. "I'm Lucas," the man said, crouching to meet Caleb's eyes. "Saw you last night. You looked like you needed a friend." He nodded toward the dog. "Seems like you found one already." Caleb's throat tightened. "My mom, she left me here. Said I'm too gay." The words burned, but saying them aloud felt like releasing a weight. Lucas's expression softened, a flicker of anger passing through his green eyes. "That's her loss," Lucas said simply. "Not yours." Lucas, it turned out, was 22, a barista who'd been kicked out by his own family years ago for the same reason. He'd been watching Caleb, not out of pity, but recognition. "I know what it's like," he said, tossing Caleb an apple from his bag. "But you don't have to go through it alone." The dog, whom Caleb named Scout, stayed by his side as he and Lucas talked. Lucas offered him a place to crash, a tiny apartment above the coffee shop where he worked. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Caleb hesitated, his pride warring with his desperation, but Scout's nudge against his leg tipped the scales. He followed Lucas, the dog trotting behind, into a world that felt both terrifying and full of possibility. Lucas's apartment was a cramped studio above Bean and Brew, a cozy coffee shop in Chicago's Andersonville neighborhood. The walls were lined with mismatched bookshelves, and a single window overlooked a bustling street. Caleb stood awkwardly in the doorway, Scout at his heels, as Lucas tossed a blanket onto a worn couch. "It's not the Ritz," Lucas said with a grin, "but it's home." Caleb managed a nod, still reeling from the past 24 hours. The kindness of a stranger and a stray dog felt surreal, like a dream he'd wake from any moment. But Scout's warm presence grounded him, and Lucas's easy smile chipped away at his defenses. Over the next few days, Caleb settled into a fragile routine. He helped at the coffee shop, wiping tables and restocking sugar packets, while Scout napped in a corner. Lucas taught him how to pull espresso shots, his hands steady and patient as he guided Caleb through the process. Their fingers brushed once, and Caleb's heart stuttered, not from fear, but something softer, something he wasn't ready to name. At night, they talked. Lucas shared stories of his own journey, how he'd hitchhiked to Chicago at 19, how he'd found a chosen family among the city's queer community. Caleb listened, his guarded heart cracking open. He told Lucas about his dad, about the small town where being himself felt like a crime. "I thought she'd come around," Caleb admitted one night, staring at the ceiling. "My mom. I thought maybe she'd love me anyway." Lucas's silence was heavy, but his hand rested lightly on Caleb's shoulder. "Some people can't see past their own fears," he said, "but that doesn't define you." Scout, ever present, seemed to sense Caleb's moods. When anxiety crept in, the dog would nudge his hand or curl up in his lap, a quiet reminder that he wasn't alone. One evening, while Lucas was closing the shop, Caleb found another note tucked under Scout's collar. "Keep going. You're stronger than you know." The handwriting matched the one from the shed, and Caleb's curiosity flared. Who was leaving these notes? And why? He showed the note to Lucas, who frowned, puzzled. "I've seen this dog around before," Lucas said, scratching Scout's ears. "Always thought he belonged to someone, but he's too scruffy for that. Maybe he's got a guardian angel." The mystery of the notes gnawed at Caleb, but so did his growing feelings for Lucas. Every shared laugh, every fleeting touch felt like a spark in the dark. But fear held him back, fear of rejection, of losing the only stability he'd found. What if Lucas didn't feel the same? What if this fragile, new life crumbled? One rainy afternoon, the coffee shop was quiet, and Lucas pulled Caleb into the back room to show him how to grind beans. The air smelled of coffee and rain, and Lucas's laughter filled the space as Caleb fumbled with the grinder. "You're hopeless," Lucas teased, stepping closer to adjust Caleb's grip. Their eyes met, and the world seemed to pause. Lucas's hand lingered on Caleb's, his breath warm and close. "Caleb," Lucas said softly, "you don't have to be afraid here." Before Caleb could respond, a customer's shout broke the moment. Lucas stepped back, his cheeks flushed, and Caleb's heart raced with unspoken words. That night, as Scout slept between them on the couch, Caleb made a decision. He'd find the courage to tell Lucas how he felt. But first, he needed to unravel the mystery of the notes, and the dog that seemed to know more than it let on. The notes kept coming. One appeared in Caleb's jacket pocket. "You're not broken. You're enough." Another was tucked into Scout's collar. "Love is worth a risk." Each one felt like a breadcrumb, leading Caleb towards something he couldn't yet see. He began to suspect the notes weren't random. They were meant for him, tied to Scout and the strange path the dog had set him on. Caleb and Lucas grew closer, their days filled with small, electric moments. A shared glance over steaming coffee cups, a late-night walk with Scout through the city's glowing streets. Caleb felt alive in a way he never had, but the shadow of his mother's rejection lingered. He hadn't heard from her since the airport, and the silence was a wound that wouldn't heal. One evening, while closing the shop, Caleb found another note on the counter. Follow the dog. He knows the way. His pulse quickened. Lucas was out picking up supplies, so Caleb grabbed Scout's leash and stepped into the chilly night. The dog led him through Andersonville's quiet streets, past rainbow flags and cozy bars, to a small community center with a sign reading Safe Haven, support for LGBTQ youth. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the hum of voices and laughter. A group of teens and young adults sat in a circle, sharing stories. Caleb hesitated, but Scout tugged him forward. A woman with kind eyes and graying hair approached. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Marie. Scout's brought us another lost soul, hasn't he?" Caleb's jaw dropped. "You know this dog?" Marie smiled. "Scout's been guiding kids like you to us for years. We don't know who he belongs to, but he's got a knack for finding people who need us." She explained that Safe Haven was a refuge for queer youth rejected by their families. The notes, she admitted, were her doing, a way to give hope without overwhelming those who weren't ready. "Scout's our little messenger," she said, ruffling the dog's fur. "He found me when I was lost, too." Caleb's chest tightened. The notes, the dog, this place, it felt like fate. He stayed for the meeting, listening to stories that echoed his own. For the first time, he felt seen, not as too gay, but as himself. When he shared his story, his voice shook, but the group's warmth wrapped around him like a blanket. When Lucas arrived, having tracked Caleb down, his presence was a quiet anchor. They walked home together, Scout trotting ahead, and Caleb felt a surge of courage. Under a street lamp's glow, he stopped and faced Lucas. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I think I'm falling for you." Lucas's smile was soft, his eyes bright. "Good," he said, stepping closer. "Because I've been falling for you since the airport." Their lips met, tentative at first, then sure, a kiss that felt like a promise. Scout barked, as if in approval, and Caleb laughed through tears. But the moment was fleeting. The next day, a letter arrived from Caleb's mother. Her words were cold, final. "Don't come back. You're not my son." The rejection hit harder than he'd expected, unraveling the fragile hope he'd built. Lucas held him as he cried, but Caleb felt the weight of his past pulling him under. Could he really build a new life when his old one still haunted him? Caleb spiraled. His mother's letter was a blade, cutting through the fragile confidence he'd gained. He withdrew, spending hours staring at the ceiling, Scout's head in his lap. Lucas tried to reach him, but Caleb's walls were up, built from years of conditional love. "I don't deserve this," Caleb muttered one night. "You, this place, any of it." Lucas knelt beside him, his voice firm. "You deserve everything, Caleb. Don't let her take that from you." But Caleb couldn't shake the shame, the fear that he'd always be too much for someone to love. Scout, as always, seemed to know what he needed. One morning, the dog dropped another note at Caleb's feet. "You are not her words. You are your own." Caleb traced the handwriting, Marie's words echoing in his mind. He realized he'd been letting his mother's rejection define him. But Safe Haven, Lucas, and Scout were proof he could be more. He threw himself into the community center, volunteering to help other kids like him. He shared his story at meetings, his voice growing stronger each time. Lucas was there, cheering him on, their bond deepening with every shared moment. They cooked dinners together, took Scout on long walks, and stole kisses in the coffee shop's back room. Caleb began to believe in a future where he could be whole. But the past wasn't done with him. One evening, a familiar car pulled up outside the coffee shop. Caleb's heart stopped, his mother. Ellen stepped out, her face a mask of regret and resolve. "I need to talk," she said, her voice clipped. Lucas stood protectively at Caleb's side, but Caleb nodded, his stomach churning. They sat in the empty shop, Scout lying watchful at Caleb's feet. Ellen's words were halting, laced with pain. "I thought I could fix you," she said. "I thought if I push you away, you'd change. But I was wrong." Her eyes glistened, but Caleb felt no warmth. Her apology was too late, too tangled with excuses. "I don't need fixing," Caleb said, his voice steady. "I needed a mom who loved me." Ellen flinched, but he continued. "I found people who do. I'm building a life without you." Ellen left, her silence louder than any words. Caleb felt a strange relief, like a chain breaking. Lucas pulled him close, and Scout nuzzled his hand. For the first time, Caleb saw his mother's rejection not as a verdict, but as her failure, not his. Spring came to Chicago, painting the city in soft greens and golds. Caleb stood taller now, his heart lighter. He and Lucas were a unit, their love a quiet strength. They'd moved into a slightly larger apartment, Scout's bed a permanent fixture in the corner. Caleb worked full-time at the coffee shop, saving for community college, his dreams of studying literature taking shape. Safe Haven became his second home. He mentored younger kids, helping them navigate their own pain. The notes from Marie kept coming, each one a reminder of his resilience. "You are the home you've built." Caleb framed them, a testament to his journey. One evening, by the lake where he and Lucas often walked, Caleb knelt to pet Scout. The dog's eyes, still soulful, seemed to hold a secret. Caleb laughed, realizing Scout had been more than a guide. He'd been a mirror, reflecting Caleb's own strength back at him. Lucas joined him, their hands intertwining as the sun set. "I used to think I was broken," Caleb said, his voice soft. "But you scout this city, you show me I'm not." Lucas kissed his forehead. "You were never broken, just waiting to be found." As they sat on a bench, Scout curled up between them. Caleb felt a profound peace. His mother's rejection had been a beginning, not an end. It had led him to Lucas, to Safe Haven, to a family forged not by blood but by love. The stray dog who'd found him at the airport had led him to a secret. He was enough, just as he was. The world wasn't perfect. Prejudice still lingered, and wounds still ached. But Caleb had found his place, his people, his heart. And as the lake shimmered under the fading light, he knew he'd never be alone again.